Those days when we were young, there's one woman that used to sell, there's this native moi moi, how do they call it now? Is it is it baked what? Baked beans? Beans cake. For those of you who are learned. So I need to use the word because some people are watching from the UK. It's beans cake. So they do this native bread with beans and with other things. So there's this woman that does hers. In the morning, if she's selling, people will come and pack cars and wash plates by themselves. Nobody will come and give you plate. You will rush and carry a plate. If somebody is eating, you will now be waiting. When the person finish eating, you will now carry the plate, go and wash it, and come and queue up. And people will be fighting themselves. You will see somebody lower his tie in the morning because they want to eat. We didn't know what was happening until one priest, a Catholic priest, showed up who had power. And when he entered the city that day, oh dear Lord, power. He showed up and they had the Holy Ghost service. And when he started worshiping, the hand of God came down and touched the woman. And the woman began to manifest. The demons began to speak. That was when we knew that what the woman uses to make her own okpa or beans cake is oil from children. And the spoon she uses is not a spoon. It's a hand of a man they gave her from the demonic coven. So when she's turning the food, it's human hand. You are seeing a spoon, but it's a hand. And when she's spicing it up, she puts oil that has been enchanted. And that oil, they extract it from children, innocent children that they kill in the demonic coven. So they extract the oil, make enchantment. So it is the fragrance from that baby that draws people. The way you see a child and you want to kiss the child, you want to hold the child, that's what draws men. And all of us without discernment. You will buy it, eat, and then keep some for break when you go to school. We now discovered there is anakazo in darkness. It is a high technology. That's why anakazo only works in the presence. It's a spirit that will put that wisdom in you. So if you see a baby now, you will just hug the baby. You will kiss the baby because of the innocence. So that was what the same aroma that was drawing everybody. You wonder why bankers will fight. Bankers that should go to work by 7:30, they are fighting to get okpa. But it was a demonic anakazo. It's in light that these things exist, but they pervert it in darkness. And so thousands, we have to lead this world. We are supposed to disciple this world, but there's a power we need to carry for the world to look at us and follow. They will not have a choice. That's why I say on the last day, the house of the Lord shall be upon the mountains of the Lord. Isaiah 2 verse 2 and Micah 4 verse 1. And he said, men of all nations shall say, let us go to the house of the Lord. He said, for out of Zion proceeds the Lord. They are coming there not to be excited. They are coming there to be discipled. Yet they will come with joy because there's a power that is compelling them. It is called anakazo. However, there are dynamics. And so tonight, the reason we are going to teach, time is the body. One power that I will trust God for before I leave this world is to suspend time. Even if it's for 1 minute, you are a body. Borrow me 15 minutes. Let me touch some things. Borrow me 15 minutes. Borrow me 15 minutes. Do I have 15 minutes? The doctrine of power. Every believer needs power. And it's not just one type of power. All. Because we are called to represent a spirit in the human sphere. And we are not just representing that spirit as a being. We are bringing the government of that spirit to superimpose on earthly government. It will take a lot of authority for that to happen. Because when you show up in a territory and you want to superimpose another government, you have made a declaration of war. Because no kingdom will give way for another kingdom without a fight. It takes battles, warfares, for spirits to be installed and their influences in territories. And every one of us is saddled with a mandate to do the same in our spheres of influence. Sit down. Let's look at what to do in order to grow in these powers. What I will share tonight has the potential of growing you in all of the dimensions of the power. So it's very important. So tonight I call it operating in power by virtue. Virtue. This kind of power is virtue that activates it. Because it is a sovereignty of God that apportions layers to you in this context. Remember, I told you power is in energy levels. The power that lights your bulb cannot power your pressing iron or your heater. You will need more intensity to carry pressing iron. And so if you want to grow in power, one area you must pay attention to is the area of virtue. And there are certain virtues that are power sensitive in this kingdom. Everybody who walked in these virtues had so much authority, and sometimes it's difficult to even trace it. But when you study the scripture in between, you will now discover these virtues they carried was what made them operate power in that order. And so tonight I just want to mention 4 of them, because we don't have time. I may just quote scriptures here and there and have you go study on it. The first virtue that releases power is brokenness. The second virtue that releases power is purity. The third virtue that releases power is reverence for God, or the fear of the Lord. And the fourth virtue that releases power is love. If you check your Christian life, these 4 things I've mentioned are constantly under attack. Everybody, there is a technology the devil will insist will work in your life to make sure you operate in pride. The reason is because he knows that humility, meekness, and brokenness is one of the activators of power. And so when a man begins to function in pride, every revelation he has will be made null and void, because God himself will resist him. He said, for God resists the proud, but he giveth more grace to the humble. And so you can have all the revelation for exousia, you can have all the prayer and prayer life that should engender dunamis, engender kratos, but if you are proud, when you are done with just your revelation and prayer, God will humble you, because the route into power is humility first. And so the reason God is humbling you is not to intimidate you, it's because without humility you can't carry power. And so what God does is to humble the proud, to humble the proud. And so a man who wants to walk in power, he won't wait for God to humble him, he will now humble himself. The Bible speaking in Psalm 51 verse 17, it said the sacrifices of God. You need to read the book of Leviticus to understand the sacrifices of God. There is the wave offering, there's the sin offering, there's the burnt offering. They are endless. Every day, one of the major assignments of priests is to slaughter animals, because the moment a man sins or there's a blemish, something is coming. So sacrifice in the courts of God doesn't end. As you are finishing one, there's a need for another. So the Israelites in those days usually keep money aside for sacrifices, because if you violate God, you are gone. And so the way they walk with God is through sacrifice. Blood must cover you all the time. But when we came into the new technology, David, being a prophet, began to look into the future, and he began to perceive something, that what God is looking for is a kind of sacrifice that does not just atone for man, but that makes man become like God, to be able to stay under the government of God. And so David summarized burnt offering, sin offering, wave offering, all the sacrifices that the Israelites offered into one thing. He said the sacrifices of God, whatever you call it, he said it is summarized into one. He said a contrite heart and a broken spirit, he said thou shalt not despise. And so when you find a humble man and a broken man, that man has offered burnt offering, he has offered wave offering, he has offered sin offering, because the totality of the sacrifices that satisfies the appetite of the oracle called Elohim is summarized in brokenness. And so every time a broken man appears, God releases the totality of his power. This is why one of the first men that wielded powers that the world has never seen is the man Moses. Before Moses came, they didn't know about power, that a man could wield power like a god. Even the people who had some measure of power before Moses, things were just happening to them. They didn't have the authority to speak and things happen. The first person that walked on earth like a god was Moses. It was Moses that showed up in Egypt just with a staff and shut down a whole civilization. It was Moses that walked for 40 days through the wilderness, and the visible Shekinah was walking with him. You could see the glory of God visibly for 40 days and 40 nights. It was Moses that opened the windows of heaven and collected angels' bread and fed men with. In the days of Moses, in the glory, the Bible said their garments grew with them, their shoe grew with them, and it said there was none feeble amongst their tribe. It was Moses that stood and said, except I'm not a man of God, let the earth open her mouth. And how did he know that the earth has a mouth? Powers. A point came, God himself addressed Moses. Exodus 7 verse 1, he said, I have made you a god unto Pharaoh. So the first man that walked in the stature of a god on earth was Moses. But what was the secret of his power? In Numbers chapter 12 verse 3, he said Moses is the meekest. That was the secret of his power. It was not a revelation, it was brokenness. He said Moses is the meekest of all men that walked on the face of the earth. In fact, a point came when other people who thought they were prophets wanted to attack Moses. Immediately the anger of God came down, and God began to warn a man for challenging another man, and he said, why were you not afraid? The stature this guy had was so tall into the heavens that God was asking another man, why were you not afraid of Moses? He said, other prophet I speak to in the similitude of visions. He said, but Moses my servant I talk to face as a man speaks to his friend. Why were you not afraid? The first man that saw the visage of God, he said, I will hide you by the cleft of the rock, and I will cause all my goodness to pass by. He said, you cannot see my face because no man see me and live. He said, however, you will see my back. The question is, what is the back of God? Because when you look at God and the presence of God, every creature that stands in the presence of God has 4 faces. Because God, the glory of God, has 4 dimensions. That's why the office of Christ is 4. That's why the tabernacle has 4 sides, because the glory of God has 4 faces. So when God is looking forward, he's looking back, he's looking side, and he's looking at the other side. So when he said, you will not see my face, you will see my back, the back is also a face. And so when Jesus said, no man has seen God at any time, what Jesus meant was, no man has seen the totality of the oracles of God. But Moses saw the back face of God, and that was why he couldn't die. They had to do experiment with his body. When Moses died, even the devil came to take his body and to study it. But what gave this man so much power? Kings bowed before him. Moses didn't need to fight. When he walked through a city, the terror of God journeyed with him, that nations paralyzed. A point came when Moses was supposed to pass through the territory of Sihon the Amorite, when he was supposed to pass through the territory of Og the king of Bashan. Stories had gone ahead that when these men pass, they lick up your city because of the power that they commanded. If they carry stones, they will defeat you. Sometimes they don't need to fight. If they pass, they will take over that land. That was why Balak needed to go seek the counsel of Balaam, because there was a testimony that whoever Balaam curses is cursed. Because we know nobody can fight Moses. Come and curse them before we fight them. And when Balaam came to curse them, Moses was not praying, but there was a technology of power that Moses knew. He said he caused Israel to sit around the tabernacle. He turned the Torah to become the center and circumference of their civilization. And so on one side you have 3 tribes, on another side he surrounded them. So before you attack them, you attack the Torah. And so even when Balaam stood up, he said, there's no enchantment against Jacob, there's no divination against Israel. You can't cross them. This man is a mobile force. What backs this man up is beyond the revelation. He said the shout of a king is in their midst. So when God is walking, when Moses is moving, it's God that is speaking. God is the one who defends him. The shout of the king. That's why he said he gave a law in the spirit. He said, touch not my anointed, do my prophets no harm. If you touch them, you are gone. How did a man walk in this power? He said Moses was the meekest of all men that live. And so any man who wants to walk in power, the first lecture he needs to have is the lecture of brokenness. When a man becomes proud, he rids himself of the possibility of authority in the spirit.